Hello, my name is Layla Andrews and welcome to my weekly analysis for the week commencing the 16th of July 2017, and today I would like to talk about Euro. And as usual, I like to start with the highest time frame that I look at, which is the monthly, and I want to give you a bit of context about where we are in the bigger picture, because sometimes you can get so focused on current price action that you forget about what might be playing a part in what could be coming up. That we need to pay attention to, but you can't see it because you're not actually looking at it. So just as a quick reference to a couple of points that I wanted to make in this particular video is that we're in this sort of range bound scenario, and things are looking very much like we are potentially moving out of a range and possibly into what looks like a more sort of bullish kind of sentiment, but I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a sec. But what I want you to notice is how different this particular block of price action looks in comparison to pretty much every other occasion where price turned. These are quite sharp V-shaped sort of turns that we've got here, and we've got one here, and we've got a little bit more of a sort of spread out base here, but it's nothing like as wide as this has been. And certainly over here, which was the most recent wide sort of floor that's been made by Euro, this is about half what we've got here. Well, maybe slightly more than half, but it is much less in terms of the extent of time that it took to carve out that particular floor, and then from there, of course, we saw a very powerful uptrend. So the reason why I'm saying this is because even though we've had all of these lower highs and lower lows, and we've obviously had this big sell-off, and we even have lower highs and lower lows within this, price has managed to just about hang on in there, and it's managed to just about stay up above the 1.05 level. So there's certainly a fair amount of defense for Euro at this particular price level. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because the longer something takes to break something and in the end doesn't break something, even after multiple tests, it tends to obviously go in the opposite direction. So with that in mind, we can have a bit of an idea about the general sort of direction, and then we look at the price action and the positioning of the EMAs on the various time frames to see how price might be moving towards its its potential target. I'd also like you to notice this bisection line that I have running through here, which I talk about these generally in most of my videos. They're not really like trend lines, but they are where I am looking for, I guess you would call the most comfortable fit, where I see the most number of clean touches, and it doesn't matter that there's the odd spike through. It's mostly about the fact that this angle and these sort of bisection points where prices come in and test it make sense all the way through the price action, which in this particular case I feel this position of this particular bisection line makes a great deal of sense to me. And where we currently are, we would be coming into it, but obviously this is the greater context at the moment, so you won't be able to see so well what I'm talking about, but we're going to go into that now. Do bear in mind, well, I actually just make this a tiny bit bigger, that we have got an EMA in our sights. It's a 50 EMA on the monthly, so that's actually quite nearby, and that is hanging around the sort of 1550 sort of level. So we just need to excuse me, that's a 1650 sort of level. So we need to take a bit of note of where that is, and I'll just make this a little bit bigger again so that you can see that more closely. There we go. So we have this 50 just here, which is starting to flatten out, which is also a sign that it's starting to agree with this general sort of shallowness of what was a downtrend that's been, although it's been making these lower lows, this is becoming incredibly shallow to the point where it actually looks like a complete sideways range. So the EMAs are starting to get themselves sort of in agreement from what was acting as dynamic resistance to now being much more sort of running through the middle of price. And when they start to run through the middle of price, you tend to get a price action from above and below, and then eventually, as is starting to happen now, price starts to climb over them. So where we've had resistance, it's now starting to get into the positioning of acting like support. So we've got the 10 EMA coming up that looks like it's going to be crossing from underneath the 20. They're very close together. That should be fairly imminent. And then of course that means that we've got the 10 and the 20 in order, which is one of the first indications that price might be trying to move with a lot more force to the upside. And obviously it also gives price something to pull back into at various stages as the cycles move on through the what is an awful lot of resistance that we've got to deal with. So we'll talk about that as well in the weekly, because it's a little bit easier to see what's happening. Just give me a sec, and I also need to make this a bit smaller. So this is where we are on the weekly, and again we have a 200 EMA right in our sights, very close by, not quite in exactly the same position but near enough where the monthly is. So these are going to be presenting a sort of double obstacle, not least of which is the fact that we are still within range. The range for me is mostly about being below this 1.15 level, which, although we've spiked out on two separate occasions, every other type of price action has closed below this level. So this is the level to break, and we are immensely close to it. Let's just make this a little bit bigger. Hang on one sec, there we go. So this sort of greyish line that we've got running through here, this is the level that we are about to come into. This also happens to meet in a very sort of fortuitous way from my personal way of doing technical analysis. Also is meeting the bisection line that I was talking about on the monthly chart. So this is an interesting area already, and if we look at the daily chart, which I will do in a sec, you'll see that there is a way of looking at this that gives you the indication of where price might be trying to go to, but as you go down into the smaller time frames, it gives you the how it's going to do that. And that, I think, is really important, because although something can be looking quite bullish, it may need a retracement, and on the lower time frames that's it's going to make a significant difference to the direction that you're going to be trading in, particularly if you're intraday and you're looking more at hourly and 30-minute type time frames. But nonetheless, there's a significant amount of potential obstruction in the way here. So we'll describe that, and then I'll go and talk about what I see on the daily and how I think this price action is going to be moving through. So just note here that we've got really nice cyclicity. We've got higher lows and higher highs. Price is already using the 10 EMA on the weekly chart for a point of equilibrium where it can pull back into and then push away. So we're already starting to behave like it's in a bit of an uptrend, but we've got to get past this 1.15 level, preferably above this bisection line, which to me is not as nearly as powerful as the 1.15 level, and then immediately we come into this 200 EMA, the 50 EMA on the monthly, and also this matching high just here on the left. In the middle of the range, which is approximately the 1.16 level. So there's a bunch of things that we're going to come into if we break the 1.15. So this is where I'm obviously seeing where I think price is trying to get to, but it's how it might do it. And we might well need to see a bit of a sell-off to pick up some more buying opportunity, and then we can try and forge ahead. And I think the daily will give us a bit more indication of that. Do also note that this bisection line that I have running through here just gives me a bit of an idea about how there may be some points through here leading up into the 1.16 where price might start to connect with not only the bisection line but also with the 200 EMA on the weekly. I do like to see where multiple factors come into play in one point. It gives you more sense of the fact that there's possibility of a strong response from price action when you've got multiple factors at play. Okay, so let's have a look at the daily, and let me just get back into position. Now, first thing I want you to note is this particular top. After we had a good push through, we had a little bit of a choppy top. So try and think of this as not exactly a replica here, but that this is potentially how price likes to currently move when it meets obstacles. So we've had a nice push up, we had a good pull back, but price has been quite choppy since. Whereas typically after a good push up and effectively a new price high for recent price action after a nice little neat pullback into a 10 EMA, which has been shown to be carrying price reasonably well. We didn't actually forge ahead and sort of go straight into the 1.15, so there seems to be already a lessening of momentum, even though these green bars are quite strong. I mean, they open at one end and pretty much close at the other, so even though there's a sense of power behind them, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Even though there is a sense of power behind them, they are not they're not moving away, they're not pushing up like they should do. This doesn't say to me that this is a currency pair that now absolutely just wants to power on through every obstacle in its way. It's not doing that. It's actually starting to look a little bit more like this. So this leads me to believe that we may well see an attempt to test the 1.15 fairly imminently. That may well then, of course, produce a reaction, which then may start a process of what I would call a bit of a curved top or a bit of a pullback after this push through. So we may expect this particular portion of price action to become a little bit more choppy. It may not be until we've actually sort of caught up with a stronger EMA. I suspect the 20 might not really get a look in on this case. Perhaps the 50 needs to come under price in order to, and we are talking about the daily, of course, so this is the 50 EMA on the daily. 50 might need to come underneath price in order to give it the force it needs to then make another go at the 1.15 to then meet its next obstacle at the 1.16 level. So as I said, I look at the higher time frames to get an idea of general direction, and then I look at the weekly and the daily, mostly the daily, to get an idea of how price action might be going about that sort of process. So my initial thoughts, and this is just my opinion judging by recent characteristics. Perhaps we may see a test of 1.15. From there we see a bounce, which then sort of sets off this process of price pulling back into this high back down here at the 1.13 level, which potentially could give price, if it sort of spreads itself out thinly enough, as in a broader kind of falling over, could connect with the 50, which then would give us the opportunity to perhaps step in and see, well, not us particularly, because I don't give that kind of advice, remember, but that is an area where buyers may well be thinking that's a better price for me to get in to go long. So do bear this in mind. The overall effect is bullish, but it's how it's going to do that, and I think it might need to have a bit of a pullback before it attempts that sort of attempts the 1.15. I do think we may see an initial attempt, which, as I say, will set off a chain reaction potentially of where price falls through to the 1.13 level and connects with the 50. So this could take a little bit of time to play out. As you can see, this is quite a few days worth of processing that took place. So we may see something similar. It's always good to look at a currency's recent characteristics, because they often give you an indication of how it might be behaving this time around as well. Okay, thanks very much for listening, and actually, just one little note. Also, I have on here the RSI, which is actually currently making lower highs, even though we are making slightly higher highs here. So there's a little bit of divergence. Not that I would put an awful lot of emphasis on this for me personally. I would have to see a much sort of stronger kind of pattern, like a sort of big head and shoulders or a big double top, and this would have to show quite extreme divergence. At the moment, this just looks like momentum is weakening, which is what we're seeing. So this is really in some respects strangely kind of agreeing with this, even though there is a little bit of divergence. But no, I've noted it anyway, because it's a sort of more subtle kind of signal. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Bye bye.